Julius Caesar, betrayed by Brutus. Betrayal hits hardest when it comes from someone you trust most. And no story proves that better than Julius Caesar's. He wasn't just Rome's most powerful man, he was its symbol, the general who conquered Gaul, expanded the Republic, and turned chaos into order. But that power, it scared people, especially the senators who feared Caesar would crown himself king, something Rome swore it would never allow again. Among them was Brutus, not just any senator, Caesar's close friend, almost like a son. Caesar had spared him in past wars, trusted him, defended him. But behind those smiles, the Senate whispered of saving Rome. And on March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, Caesar walked into the theater of Pompey, surrounded by men he called allies. One by one, the daggers came out. 23 stab wounds. The final blow came from Brutus. Caesar's words, "Et tu, Brute," weren't just shock, they were heartbreak. His death didn't save the Republic, it destroyed it. Within years, Rome fell into civil war, and Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, became its first emperor. So
Cleopatra and Mark Antony, the lovers who lost everything. You ever love someone so deeply you'd risk everything, power, legacy, even your life, just to stand by them? That was Cleopatra and Mark Antony, two of the most powerful people on earth, brought down not by armies, but by love and betrayal. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, brilliant, multilingual, and politically ruthless. Mark Antony, Rome's top general, once Caesar's right hand, now one of the three rulers of the Roman world. When they met in 41 BCE, it wasn't just romance, it was strategy. Each saw in the other a way to rule the world, but passion blurred politics. Their love enraged Rome, especially Octavian, Caesar's heir, who painted them as traitors, a Roman general bewitched by a foreign queen. He spread rumors that Antony had pledged Rome's power to Egypt. Whether true or not didn't matter. Perception was poison. In 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, Octavian crushed their forces. Cornered in Alexandria, Antony heard Cleopatra was dead and took his own life. When she found out, she followed, using a venomous asp to end her story. Their deaths marked the end of Egypt's independence and the birth of the Roman Empire. So, what began as a love meant to unite two worlds became the
Joan of Arc, burned by the people she saved. Imagine leading your nation to victory, only to be betrayed by the very people you saved. That's the story of Joan of Arc, a teenage girl who changed the course of history with nothing but faith and fire. Born in 1412 in a small French village, Joan claimed she heard divine voices, saints telling her to save France from English rule during the 100 Years' War. At just 17 years old, she convinced the prince, Charles of Valois, to let her lead an army. And she did what hardened generals couldn't. She lifted the siege of Orleans in 1429, a miracle that reignited France's spirit. But power hates the unexpected. When politics shifted, Joan became too dangerous. Captured by Burgundian allies of the English, she was sold to her enemies, while the French king she had crowned stayed silent. No rescue, no justice. In 1431, at just 19, Joan was put on trial for heresy, a sham trial meant to break her image. Her final words before being burned alive? "Hold the cross high, that I may see it through the flames."
Anne Boleyn, betrayed by her king. They say love can change the world, but for Anne Boleyn, it changed her life and ended it. When she caught King Henry VIII's eye in the 1520s, England was already shaken by whispers of power, religion, and rebellion. Anne wasn't just beautiful, she was sharp, ambitious, magnetic. Henry promised her everything, not just love, but a crown. The only problem? He was already married. To be with Anne, Henry defied the Pope himself, breaking England away from the Catholic Church and creating the Church of England. All for her. In 1533, she became queen. For a moment, she was untouchable, the most powerful woman in England. But power built on passion never stands for long. Anne gave Henry a daughter, Elizabeth, who would one day become one of history's greatest monarchs, but not the son he desperately wanted. Soon, Henry's love turned to suspicion. His court filled with enemies who whispered lies, treason, witchcraft, adultery. None of it proven, none of it mattered. In 1536, Anne was arrested, tried in secret, and sentenced to death. Calm and composed, she faced the sword with dignity, saying, "I pray God save the king." Her fall was brutal, but her legacy survived. The daughter she bore became the ruler Henry
Marie Antoinette, sold out by her own court. Imagine living in a palace so grand you couldn't hear the cries outside its gates until it was too late. That was Marie Antoinette, the queen who trusted everyone until everyone wanted her dead. Born an Austrian princess, she was just 14 when she was married off to France's future king, Louis XVI, a political alliance meant to unite empires. But at Versailles, she became a symbol of everything that people hated: wealth, arrogance, and waste. The truth? Much of it was rumor, fueled by jealousy and propaganda. She threw lavish balls, wore towering hairstyles, and was called Madame Deficit when France's economy collapsed. While the country starved, pamphlets painted her as heartless, even spreading the infamous lie that she said, "Let them eat cake." She never did. But perception became poison. As revolution swept France in 1789, her own nobles turned against her. Her guards fled. Her friends vanished. She and her family were imprisoned, stripped of crowns, dignity, and safety. After a sham
Jesus Christ! Betrayed by Judas? Some betrayals change lives. This one changed the world. The story of Jesus Christ and Judas Iscariot isn't just about faith, it's about loyalty, greed, and the cost of choice. For 3 years, Judas walked beside Jesus, one of his 12 closest followers. He saw the miracles, the healing, the forgiveness. He heard words that moved nations. Yet, deep down, something dark grew. Doubt, disappointment, maybe greed. The Gospels say he went to the priests, offering to hand Jesus over for 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave. On the night of the Last Supper, Jesus already knew. He looked Judas in the eye and said, "What you are about to do, do quickly." Hours later, in the Garden of Gethsemane, Judas arrived with soldiers and marked his friend with a kiss.
Richard III betrayed by his own allies. They say a crown sits heavy on the head that wears it, but for Richard III, it became a target. A king surrounded by loyalty until ambition whispered otherwise. Richard wasn't always the villain Shakespeare made him out to be. He was a skilled commander, a man who fought for stability during one of England's darkest times, the Wars of the Roses. When his brother, King Edward IV, died suddenly in 1483, Richard was named protector of the realm for Edward's young son. But soon, whispers spread that the boy and his brother were dead, vanished inside the Tower of London. Whether truth or rumor, the damage was done. Richard claimed the throne, but England was already turning on him. Nobles who once stood beside him began shifting sides, drawn by promises from Henry Tudor, a rival with royal blood and ambition to match. At the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, betrayal struck at the worst moment. Key allies defected mid-fight, leaving Richard's army surrounded. Still, he refused to flee. Witnesses said he charged straight toward Henry himself, shouting, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" Moments later, he was cut down. With his death ended the Plantagenet dynasty and began the Tudor era. Richard III's story isn't just about power lost. It's about how loyalty built on fear will always crumble when the winds of fortune change.
Napoleon Bonaparte betrayed by his own empire. He rose from nothing, a soldier from Corsica who rewrote Europe's destiny. But in the end, the man who crowned himself emperor was left standing alone, betrayed by the very empire he built. Napoleon Bonaparte was brilliance in motion, strategist, reformer, visionary. He took control of France after revolution in chaos, promising order and glory. And for a time he delivered, conquering Europe, reshaping nations, turning France into the world's superpower. But absolute power comes with a clock. Every victory fed his pride. Every battle demanded more blood. When his 1812 invasion of Russia collapsed, the myth of Napoleon's invincibility shattered. Soldiers froze and starved, over 400,000 men lost in a single campaign. Europe smelled weakness, and old allies turned enemies overnight. By 1814, as his armies crumbled, his generals, once loyal beyond reason, begged him to surrender. Even the marshals he had made powerful now refused to fight. The empire didn't fall to force alone. It fell to exhaustion, betrayal, and fear. Exiled to the island of Elba, Napoleon escaped once more, reclaiming his throne for a brief
Tsar Nicholas II betrayed by his closest guards. Imagine ruling the largest empire on earth and realizing too late that even your guards no longer believe in you. That was Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, a man undone not just by revolution, but by betrayal from within his own walls. When Nicholas took the throne in 1894, Russia was vast, proud, and crumbling. His rule was absolute, yet his judgment uncertain. He loved his family deeply, but ruled like the world would never change. Then came the storms, military defeats, economic collapse, and the Bloody Sunday massacre, where peaceful protesters were gunned down outside his palace. The people's faith shattered, and so did his power. By 1917, World War I was tearing Russia apart. Soldiers starved, cities rioted, and whispers of mutiny spread through the ranks. Nicholas abdicated, believing it would spare his family. But the betrayal ran deeper than politics. His own guards, once sworn to die for him, now turned their guns away. Under Bolshevik control, the Romanovs were held captive in a house in Yekaterinburg. And on a dark night in July 1918, those same guards entered their room, not to protect them, but to execute them. Nicholas, Alexandra, their children, all gone in seconds. The Romanovs didn't just lose a throne, they lost the trust that built an empire. In the end, it wasn't the revolution that killed them. It was the silence of those who once stood watch.
Marie Stuart, Mary, Queen of Scots, betrayed by blood and throne. Born a queen, destined for greatness, and destroyed by those closest to her. Mary Stuart's life wasn't just a royal tragedy, it was betrayal written in blood. Crowned Queen of Scotland when she was just 6 days old, Mary was sent to France to grow up among kings. Intelligent, charming, and fiercely proud, she returned to her homeland at 18, young, beautiful, and already a widow of the French king. But Scotland had changed. Religion was tearing it apart, Protestants and Catholics fighting for control, and Mary, a Catholic queen, stood in the middle of the storm. Her marriages became political traps. Her second husband, Lord Darnley, turned violent and jealous, and when he was murdered, suspicion fell on Mary herself. Whether guilty or not, the damage was done. Her enemies, powerful Scottish nobles, rose against her, forcing her to flee to England, seeking safety from her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. But Elizabeth saw her not as family, but as a threat. For nearly 19 years, Mary was kept prisoner, accused of plotting to steal England's crown. Eventually, one conspiracy, real or fabricated, sealed her fate.
William Wallace, betrayed by his own countrymen. They called him an outlaw, a rebel. But to Scotland, he was freedom itself. William Wallace wasn't born a noble or a king. He was a common man who dared to defy an empire. And for that, his own countrymen sold him out. In 1296, when England's King Edward I invaded Scotland, Wallace's life changed forever. English soldiers murdered his family, and he answered not with words, but with war. He gathered farmers, laborers, and clansmen into an army of rage and hope. Against all odds, they crushed the English at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, a victory so shocking it echoed across Europe. For a moment, Scotland was free. Wallace became guardian of the realm, the symbol of resistance. But power breeds envy. The Scottish nobles, divided and afraid, saw him as a threat. After a crushing defeat at Falkirk, Wallace went into hiding, hunted by both England and his own people. In 1305, betrayal found him. Captured near Glasgow by Scottish traders seeking English favor, he was handed over for gold. The English executed him publicly, hanging Samson and Delilah, the lover who cut his power. They say love can make you stronger, but for Samson it became the weapon that destroyed him. The man blessed with divine strength, undone by love and deceit. Born a Nazarite, Samson was chosen by God before birth, his strength a symbol of Israel's hope against the Philistines. His secret? A vow never to cut his hair. As long as that vow held, no army could defeat him. He tore lions apart with his bare hands, defeated thousands with a single jawbone. He was unstoppable. Then came Delilah, beautiful, charming, and sent by the Philistines to uncover his weakness. She didn't strike with a sword. She used something far deadlier: affection. Time and again she asked where his power came from, and time and again he lied. But love blinds even the strongest eyes. Finally, he broke. He told her the truth, that his strength lived in his uncut hair. While he slept, she cut it. His power vanished. Betrayed and captured, the Philistines gouged out his eyes and chained him in their temple, their once great enemy, now their trophy. But even broken, Samson's spirit burned. In his final act, he prayed for strength one last time and brought Admiral Yi Sun Sin, betrayed by his own king. Some men are born to lead armies, others to save nations. Admiral Yi Sun Sin did both, and still fell to the one enemy he could never defeat, his own king's jealousy. In the late 1500s, Korea faced invasion from Japan, a naval onslaught that seemed unstoppable. While others panicked, Yi stood calm. He rebuilt a shattered navy from nothing, mastering the seas with strategy and innovation. His secret weapon? The Gobuksan, or turtle ship, the world's first ironclad warship. In battle after battle, Yi outsmarted fleets 10 times his size. At Myeongnyang, he commanded just 13 ships against over 130 Japanese vessels, and still won. His courage saved Korea from total collapse. But back in the royal court, envy festered. Ministers whispered lies to King Seonjo, painting Yi as arrogant, disloyal, too powerful to trust. Without evidence, the king stripped him of command, imprisoned him, and even tortured him. Yet when Korea's navy fell apart,
The Byzantine Emperor Alexius V, betrayed in the last hour. History remembers the fall of Constantinople as a clash of civilizations, but behind the walls, it was also a story of betrayal. And at the center of it all stood Emperor Alexios V Doukas, the last desperate ruler of a dying empire. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade, meant to reclaim the Holy Land, turned its swords on the Christian city of Constantinople. Corruption, politics, and broken deals brought Western crusaders against their own faith. The Byzantine throne was chaos, emperors rising and falling overnight. Alexios V came to power not by inheritance, but by seizing control in the empire's darkest hour. Unlike the weak rulers before him, he actually fought. He strengthened defenses, rallied soldiers, and for a moment, gave the people hope. But when the Crusaders breached the city walls, that hope collapsed. As fire swallowed the skyline, Alexios turned to the Treaty of Versailles, betrayal on a global scale. When the guns of World War I finally fell silent in 1918, the world prayed for peace. But the peace that came wasn't healing, it was punishment. And it carried within it the betrayal that would set the world on fire again. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was meant to end the war to end all wars. Instead, it became one of the most controversial documents in history. Germany, broken and exhausted, expected fairness. Instead, it got humiliation. The Allies, Britain, France, and the US, demanded reparations so severe they crushed the German economy, stripped away territory, and branded the entire nation guilty of war. Even the peacemakers betrayed their own ideals. Woodrow Wilson came with his dream of a League of Nations and peace built on justice, but he was overruled by vengeance and politics. Behind closed doors,
Old empires carved up lands, redrew borders, and divided nations like spoils of war. To the Germans, it wasn't peace. It was betrayal. A treaty signed under duress, fueled by resentment. And that resentment became the spark that lit the rise of Adolf Hitler, who used the treaty's humiliation as his rallying cry. So, while Versailles ended